Hello, and welcome to another episode of the eReads podcast. My name is Liz, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are jumping into the world of diversity with Dr. Katherine Hayes. And before we jump into that, let me tell you a little bit about her. So, she is an author, speaker, educational consultant, and editor. She has had her hands in leadership for many years. She loves speaking to groups and delivering messages with a quick wit and real life stories. Dr. Katherine is a freelance writer, a content editor / writing coach for Iron Stream Media, and sensitivity reader for Sensitivity Between the Lines. She is a reviewed board member and contributor to Inkspirations, an online magazine for Christian writers, and her writing has been published in Guidepost. Her work has been distinguished by many, many awards. So now that you know a little bit about her, let's jump right into the episode so we can learn how we can promote and be inclusive in the world of literature. Dr. Katherine Hayes, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here, Liz. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
to welcome folks to the show, I like to start by asking them what I like to call a bookish question, which is something about books or reading related. So the one that I have for you
Mhm.
is, oh, I didn't write one down. So, ooh, off the top of my head,
Mhm.
I would like to know, okay, when, no, I'll go with this. What snack most is similar to like your book or a book that you like? So if you had to summarize your book in the form of a snack, what would it be?
Okay. So for the okay, I'm going to think my thriller, my debut thriller. A snack would be a charcuterie board. It would
Ooh.
definitely have, yeah, peppered dry salami. It would have Gouda cheese on there. There would be
Ooh.
yeah, there'd be some pepper jack. Lots of pepper, as you can
This is
see,
a book
pepper
I need to
jelly.
read.
Yeah. There would be blue cheese stuffed olives. There would be black olives.
Ooh.
There would be water crackers. Yeah, all that good stuff. Grapes. There we go.
Okay,
A
so now
nice
you gotta
bottle of wine.
okay. So now you gotta tell us about your debut novel. What is your debut novel about? Please tell us more.
Yeah. So my debut novel is called A Fifth of the Story,
Mm.
and it comes out February 27th of 2024. It's published by Endgame Press.
Mm-hmm.
And that book, the premise is, people always say there are three sides to a story, or yeah, they say there are two sides to a story, or three sides sometimes, right? Um, and so my premise is okay, so if an incident happens, there's my side, there's your side, there are the facts, um, there are what other people see and think, and then
Mm.
there's what God sees. And the premise of this novel is, if we live for that one fifth of what God sees and what he thinks about it, then we will have a good life.
Mm.
That's the premise. And then the other premise that it addresses are real concerning issues such as breaches in our intelligence agencies and the rise of anti-Semitism, and
Mm.
also the rise of white supremacy and the
Right.
dangers it poses to our country, and the rise of nationalism, and how potently dangerous that is.
Oh my goodness. So a charcuterie board definitely brings all that together.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, please, Dr. Catherine, please share how did this start out for you, right? Like, have you always been an author? How did this journey start for you?
Yeah. Well, in high school, I did have an English teacher. I could just see his face right now, who really believed in me, and he thought I should be published. And and so he'd exposed me to authors who were really young at the time, and that dream fizzled away because I was in New York at the time, and I was trying to chase a career as an author, and it was like being an actress. And so I would have to get other jobs to try to to live off of my
Right.
writing income. Okay,
Mhm.
so one thing led to another, and I ended up going into education. And not that that's a whole lot better, but I then became an administrator, and where that's, if you want to make money in education, you have to go into leadership. So I was on track to become superintendent, probably that's what my doctorate is in. It is in that kind of leadership, at the
Mhm.
university level, or a superintendent, or school administration. I was enjoying being a principal. And I took a sabbatical. I had gotten ill after having my last child, and my husband was deployed all the time. And so, as an experiment, this was supposed to be like a 6-month thing.
Mhm.
My husband and I had agreed that I was going to pursue publication and writing, and just seeing where that would lead. Well, it turned into like over 10 years of working toward that.
Really?
Yeah, and I just never went. I kept on thinking I'm going back this year. I kept on looking up, you know, uh, job advertisements. I kept on thinking, okay, I'm going to go back as a principal, or I'm going to go back to the university, because I was a guest lecturer for my former doctoral program. I'm going to go back, and I just, more doors kept on opening for me in the publishing industry. And
Mm.
yeah, and one thing led to another. Now I work full time as a freelance editor. I work for a traditional publishing company as a book coach and an editor, and I have my
Wow.
own string of clients. And then I'm on the speaking circuit for a few writing conferences.
Oh my gosh, that is definitely an interesting transition and career
Yeah.
path.
Hmm.
And in that journey, I know today we're talking a lot about diversity in publishing. And
Hmm.
can you share what has that experience been as far as diversity? Like, eh, has it changed over your career? What are you noticing?
Yeah. So, okay. So I started out in the Christian publishing realm, and I'm still there. Um, but I think it's important for Christians to occupy secular spaces. We can't just be beacons of light shining at each other. We've got to get out
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
So, what's disparaging to me is that the Christian publishing industry is not much different from the secular publishing
Mm,
industry, whereas there is very little diversity, and people may feel as if there is diversity, but it's not as much as they think.
mm,
So, for instance, like 90, just in terms of U.S. book publishing, 95% of American fiction books published were written by white authors, and that is between 1950 and
yeah.
2018.
Oh wow.
And after George Floyd, there was a slight uptick in diversity, but since then is sort of fizzled out. Sometimes
Right.
when big things happen, there's this knee jerk reaction, and people are like, "Oh yeah, we're going to get on board and we're
Right.
going to change things around." And then when things go back to status quo, that hope is lost. And,
Mm,
and what's really frightening, um, like for instance, as of 2020, 75% of people in the industry claimed, right, that their employer had made some kind of increase
mm-hmm.
or effort to increase diversity. But despite that, still not much has changed in 2023. I think 1%, there's been like a 1% increase in
Wow.
that sort of diversity. And this is just combing through lots of research, because I love research, and I'd
Yeah.
like to speak from a place of fact finding and just not making up stuff off
Mm,
the top of my head. These are easily things that people can go and research for themselves. If they
right.
think, oh, this America's exploding with book diversity, they will find out that even the children's books, because there's a call, there's a real need for diversity in children's
Hmm.
literature. Most of the books written about diversity and about diverse people are written by non-diverse people.
Let me tell
That's
you.
crazy.
The regular season is heating up. New stars are emerging, and that means more opportunities to win up to 25 times your cash on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projection on a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's that easy. Let it fly to turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Watch your favorite players and get paid doing it this basketball season. See your entries make progress during the game or make new entries for the second half and the fourth quarter. 3-pointers, assists, rebounds, and everything in between are yours for the taking. Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code GET100. That's code GET100 on Prize Picks for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
I just literally before this was scrolling and I saw there was a video about that. And it was like it had a picture of a children's book with an African American child or
Hmm.
a child of color, and then the author is white. And like
Hmm.
it was multiple books.
Hmm.
And I think that's important too to the conversation. It's like when there's a call for diversity, we mean also the people that put out the product and the work. We're not just talking about products for
Right.
people of color. We're talking about like made by, so that way again, like we're also seeing that growth. And I think
Yeah.
there's sometimes is that disconnect.
Yeah. And that would call for diversity at the top level. So
Right.
we have the gatekeepers, we have agents. Most people, if they want to be traditionally published, then you usually will have to get an agent. Not
Hmm.
all the time. There's a small percentage that can sneak in some other way. Um, and then there are the pub boards, right? And
Hmm.
so a pub board has to vote on your book.
Mm.
So one, you have to get an agent, which sometimes is more difficult than getting a publishing contract.
Right.
I know, I've been through it. And I deal with a lot of authors. So there's that. So now that you get to this other level, just think when you're at the pub board level, you still have the majority white um, looking at your project to decide if they're going to publish it or not. So there are many gatekeepers, and the problem with that is even if someone who is non-diverse, right, and they're trying to get a book published that's about diverse characters, this is the problem that's happening is then there are books that are coming through that are stereotypical. They're not representing diverse people correctly. They're not vetted because no one is there to vet them. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Yeah. Mm,
Absolutely, because it
mm,
also makes me think of, right, like when being traditionally published, right, they kind of have a lot of control. So if you
mhm,
have a story or characters that are, we'll say, more diverse, they might say this might not read well, or we need to
mhm.
make this change and make this
Right.
change, and that
Yeah.
takes away from the life and the culture of the book. So absolutely, that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Mhm.
And yeah, so to your point, I think diversity isn't just the face of the author, but it also is like throughout the top, right at the top of the publishing within the boards, so that there is really this call of diversity.
And so not even just racial diversity, right?
Hmm.
I'm a strong I'm a strong advocate for disabled people,
Yeah.
people with special needs, and especially because I was a school principal for a while and an educator. And in fact, the last school that I was a principal of, it was a hub for special needs.
Mm.
And then in researching diversity in terms of, are you hiring people who are disabled? Are you hiring people who might have an issue with dyslexia,
Mm-hmm.
or who they're in a wheelchair or something like that. They're quite capable and incredible. One of the smartest young ladies in my doctoral program was dyslexic. So I wonder, when I looked at the statistics, they were very disappointing. I think it was something like maybe 3%
Mm.
of individuals who were employed in the publishing industry were described as having a disability.
Wow.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like just even like you mentioned, like across the board, right? Like
Hmm.
we need the publishing industry to look like life looks, just diverse.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Hmm.
Mm. Let me pick your brain and see, like, how do we fix this? What are things that people can do to encourage more diversity?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you. I'm so glad you asked. Uh, hey, write to the big five, write to publishing companies and say, I would like to see not only diverse books, but books by diverse people. That would help. Another thing that would help is if you are a person who's not diverse, right, and you want to write about diverse characters, I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm.
But vet your book.
Right.
Hire a sensitivity reader. There are reputable companies who can do that for you. I work for a company called Sensitivity Between the Lines.
Oh,
I
wow.
highly recommend it. Yeah, it's under the umbrella of a conference called Blue Ridge Christian Mountain Writers. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but if you look it up, you'll be able to see Sensitivity Between the Lines
Yeah.
and what those readers do. It's a form of editing, but they don't like to call it that. But it's a type of reading they do where that particular reader has a specific background in whatever that person has written. Like for instance, I specialize in all things Holocaust. Okay, that's
Mm.
just my thing, right? Because my mother, you may not know it looking at me, but my mother was a descendant of Portuguese Jews, and they ended up in Jamaica escaping persecution. So that's really important to me. So
Right.
I research a lot of, so all things the Holocaust, all things civil. I love the Civil War movement. I love the things about slavery, Afro Caribbean, because my,
Mhm.
my parents were Jamaican. So those things, and African American females, that's my that's my niche. So if I'm going to read something from that lens, I'm looking to make sure that you're not embracing stereotypes. They could be subtle, but they're dangerous.
Mm.
And I'm helping you because it's not something that you have to do, but it's something that it's highly advisable
Right.
because it will protect you. It will protect the integrity of your project, and it will also protect you once your book is published. Because once it's out there in the world, that's it.
Yeah.
And so if you've carefully vetted that book, um, then you're much less likely to offend your readers, and you are much likely to find readers who are going to just love you. They're
Right.
going to love that you did your research, that you carefully vetted your characters, because people who are diverse are going to be like, oh, but she gets us, or he gets
Right.
us. And there's nothing better than to feel seen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes me think of like, books when you've read and like the characters feel so real because like,
Mm-hmm.
you get it. You didn't just like watch an episode of something and you're like, oh, this is
Right.
what all this people act like. Like, no, like you either lived that experience or you educated yourself, and it just adds so much more depth, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take you out of the reading. Like you're there, you
Exactly.
understand what's going on. So absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another question for you is, i- in thinking about self-publishing versus traditional publishing, does like self-publishing help the market become more diverse? Should diverse authors seek to be published traditionally? Kind of like any thoughts about that?
That's a great question. Yeah. Actually, minorities had no choice but to self publish. because that's how bad things were in terms of the gatekeepers.
Right.
I'm thinking of authors like, gosh, off the top of my head, one is like Carl Weber, another is Elin Harris. These are guys who started out like selling books out of the back of their car and stuff
Mm,
like that. And they became like New York Times best-selling novelists. Uh, they ended up flipping the script and ended up getting traditional publishing contracts and all of that. But that's because the industry had to take notice of them because they were setting up their own book launches. They were um, marketing themselves. They were getting on Black radio stations and going in Black spaces. And then what happened is the publishing industry is saying, "Oh, this is a market that we didn't, we haven't really
right.
paid attention to. Like we could really profit here. Oh, let me go ahead and get this person a publishing contract." And that's how it's happened for a couple of minorities. And so, unfortunately, that was the way that many had to go. And I'm also speaking for our other Asian brothers and sisters, our Latin brothers
Mm-hmm.
and sisters, and so it's not just African American; it's across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of them would have to then self-publish. So here's so the cons and pros are, the pros are you have complete autonomy over
Right.
your book, over everything, but you also have to absorb the cost of marketing, and it's very expensive to do all of the things that have to do with publishing a book. It can be
Mm-hmm.
daunting, and unfortunately many people are taken advantage of when it comes to publishing. It's sad, but there are very few spaces like that places like you offer, like you're offering
Right.
a space for an author to come and no strings attached. I have a podcast like that, no strings attached. But so many times people are making money off of aspiring authors or people who are already trying to get
Right.
established. So that's sort of one side. The negative side is that the market has been flooded because of self-publishing, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much garbage out there, and then it becomes harder to become noticed. And then because of all the garbage out there, self-publishing a book can kind of be, frowned upon
Yeah.
by,
Very stigmatized because
right, you
not everyone
stigmatize,
does their due diligence or gets an editor.
right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. If you're going to do it well by hiring an editor, by getting a professional graphic artist and putting out a product that's really professional looking and professionally edited and vetted, that's great. But just imagine people just make up stuff off the top of their heads. They don't vet anything and they just
Right.
throw it out into the universe. It really stigmatizes a lot of the
Yeah.
rest of us. Now, traditional publishing, on the other hand, now, what that does for you is it shows that you're a credible writer
Yeah.
because you've had to go through all of you've had to jump through the hoops, right? Most of you have had to get a an agent, or you know, or if you're fortunate enough, you've been able to get directly to the publisher,
Mm-hmm.
which is almost even more more of an honor because that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one of the pros of being traditionally published. And then being traditionally published, a publisher is going to take more of an interest in that person. They're going to do help you with marketing. They're not going to do all your marketing because in this
Mm-hmm.
day and age, a lot of you've got to almost be known before the book deal. So
That is so true.
yeah, you've got to build your platform. You can't just think you're going to get a book deal and then build your platform. That's not
Mm-hmm.
going to happen. Those days are over. So those are the pros with traditional publishing. They'll also get your books into places that you may not have been able to get them,
Sure.
and maybe get you engagements. Maybe some traditional publishers, they even have their own publicists, and
Mhm.
so you'll have a publicist and all of that good stuff.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
One more question in regards to diversity, and then I want to ask you about some of your books. Um, what can people do? Well, question kind of is, so you have, like we touched on, a lot of folks who are, we'll say white authors, and they're putting out things about Black characters.
Mhm.
Does that help people of color, writers of color? Like, how can people really be an ally and really be supportive in this space, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, it can be positive if it's done well. If they had, like, there's a book I have over here on my shelf. Well, she's one of my she is okay, it's called Small Great Things, Jodi Picoult. That book is about white supremacy. And she
Mm,
writes, because I wanted to see, why did you want to write? Why did you take this upon yourself? Because it's a
right.
tough book to write. And it's a story where she had the nugget of her, it's based on a real event, but she fictionalizes the entire story. But the other things that are true is all of her fact finding about the rise of white supremacy in our country, are they're real, and
Mm,
she's got a great bibliography in there, and she does a really good job of research. But what she also explains is that she did sensitivity reading, so she had
right.
African American, especially
Wow.
African American females, vet these characters. And I thought she did an incredible job of
Mm.
representing us. Like, I did not feel offended. I did
Oh,
not
that's
feel
lovely.
like yeah, it was not stereotypical. She very much nailed the Black female experience,
Oh, I love that.
and even some of the Black male experience, because there was an issue. There was a point there where her son was going to get into trouble. She had gotten into trouble. This is her main character.
Hmm.
It was a medical thing, and I don't want to give away the entire story, but she was able to nail how Black females are seen, who are supposedly in roles of leadership or supposedly intelligent. You could be a medical professional. How our Black boys are seen
Yeah.
through the lens of the police, and the things that we fear, the experiences that we have, the conversations we have behind closed doors. She very much got that. It was very easy to tell that she was in deep relationship with people of color, and that's what's important. We just ask that if you're going to write about us, know us.
Right. That's a really great way to say that. A
Hmm.
really great way to say that and frame that.
Hmm.
Um, please share more. Well, I was really curious about your book. It's called God's Little Black Dress, and it's talking about like femininity. And please share a little bit about this book that you have out.
Yeah. So that book came out in May of 2016, and that was a real learning experience, right? So I piloted that book at a church I was attending at the time, and it it did really well in terms of the Bible studies, the feedback from the women, and I was bringing that book as a proposal, and I was pitching it at a writers conference. But prior to that, there was a family that needed to go to Mongolia, and I wanted to help fund them because they were
Mm,
short of their funds. So what I did was and one of the females, her name is actually Roxanne Lee. She's an incredible graphic artist. She helped me prepare that project and package it as a book, and I published it on Lulu, which is it's like a self-publishing forum, right? But it was done well because I had it, done by a graphic artist and all of that. And we were able to meet a mark between all of the other things that we did, including sell that book. They had the funds to do what they needed to do. I was
fantastic.
happy. And then I was on my merry way to this conference thinking all was well with the world.
Hmm.
And then I met with, and this was my first big major writers conference since taking a sabbatical from school administration, right? So I go in and I think this is gonna be great. And the first thing they wanted to know was about my numbers and about the book launch and about what I was like, book launch. I didn't do a book launch. I didn't do this. I'm like, numbers. All I know is I made enough for these cats to go to Mongolia. And so they were like, yeah, unless you sold, some publishers said, well, unless, or agents said, unless you sold between 3 to 5,000 copies, we're not interested.
Mm,
Some were like 8 to 10,000
wow.
copies. And I was like, oh no, that's not what happened. Um, and then one particular agent who was interested in me, he went back home and he did his research, and then he sent me a beautifully written rejection letter, and he said, "You're a great writer, you have a great product, but you have no platform." And he
Mm,
said, "For nonfiction, you must have a platform." So it was a learning lesson.
right.
And so I had to learn the hard work of building platform. So that book still passively sells. It's on, barnesandnoble.com. It was in Lifeway for a short bit of time until Lifeway closed. And it's on lots of different Amazon, it's lots of different online forums. And as an editor now, I look at that book and I pick it apart. I know that there are things that I would have done much better. And I think later on I will do an anniversary edition to that book. But
Very cool.
yeah, but the heart of that book is still good. And that's why I think it still appeals to women. I wrote it for my daughters. And it came out of many different conversations I would have with them, because they would constantly say, well, mom, the Bible is not really applicable to today's issues and what we're going through and what's happening. It doesn't really speak about anything that we're engaged in or we're feeling. And I'm like, yes, it does. Okay, you're okay. Here, it's talking about gender issues. It's talking about
Hmm.
um, life and conception. It's talking about race issues. It's dealing with everything that you have on your hearts. And so in that book, I play on fashion, because that was a big thing for us girls, still is. I mean, and so it was based on Coco Chanel's Little Black Dress.
Hmm.
And so there's all types of little anecdotes there about all kinds of designers and things that they say, which are fabulous, and just relating the armor of God to like a little black dress, that it's suitable for all kinds of occasions, and we can still be women of God, dress for this world, dress for battle, and still be cute
I love that
and still
premise.
be
Hmm.
hip.
I love that premise. Please share, where can folks find more of your work? Where can they connect with you?
Oh wow, that I would love to connect. The best place is my website. It's real simple. It's www.dr. Katherine Katherine Hayes Hayes.com. That's where you find all the ways to connect with me. It'll keep you if you sign up for my newsletter, or actually just sign up for my email. I send out a free weekly devotional word of encouragement. I work with 7 other bloggers on my blog, and we've got encouragement for you every week. And it just keeps you up to date about what we're up to. And it also has information about a podcast I run. I run a podcast called Murder, Mystery, and Mayhem Laced with Morality. It's featured on Apple and on Spotify and all other places that podcasts are heard. I would love if people would come and, listen in, drop us a comment, leave us a review. If you want to come on the podcast, hey, send me an email. I'd love to schedule you.
Listen, I cannot wait to binge listen. You have been such a wonderful guest. You've educated us so much on not only the importance of diversity, but how we can take steps to further this and make it known that it is important.
Mhm.
Um, Please, can you share for someone, like, if they are identifying as a diverse author, whether that's by disability, gender, race, all of that, and they're like, how do I get started? Right? Like, I see that there's a space here. Where
Mhm.
do I start in breaking that glass ceiling? Any words of encouragement or advice for them?
Yeah. So I'm a person of hope. Like yes, I see all of the pitfalls, all of the negativity, all of the obstacles. But despite that, you can still prosper and you can still be engaged and you can still get published. People, come on, if you don't write and you don't put your stuff out there and chase the market, it's not going to happen for you. So the first thing to do is write, okay? And the
Mhm.
second thing to do is write well.
Mhm.
And after you write well, write better. And how you do that is that you've got to get critiqued, you've got to hook up with a writing community, preferably a writing community where they're going to give really good critiques.
Mhm.
One that I highly recommend, and it's a Christian space, but hey, they love everybody. It's
Yeah.
called Word Weavers International. It is
Mhm.
one of the best critique groups I've ever seen. Word Weavers International. And then the other thing to do is attend writers' conferences. There are many ways to do it, especially because of the pandemic. People have really begun thinking outside of the box. So there are
Right.
plenty of ways to attend even online. Even if you can't afford to take off from work to attend one of these conferences, you can go online. And if you attend online, many times they're discounted anyway.
Absolutely. And they have replays. So if like you mentioned,
Yes.
you can't, there's so many accessible options now. And
Hmm.
again, uh, they're really affordable.
Yeah. Contests, another way
Oh,
to
yeah.
contest. That's another way to build credibility. There are many contests out there even that have entry fees. Some of them are nominal, like $5 to all the way to maybe $100. But if you really don't have it, there are plenty of free ways for you to also enter writers conferences, not writers conferences, but writing
Mhm.
contests, and it helps to build credibility. I know because I can't say now because I'm in judge season, but I am a judge for a couple of different writing contests, and I know that that opens a lot of doors
Mm,
for authors.
lovely. And I haven't even thought about that, but absolutely. We'll have to have you come back and talk about that experience.
I would love that. Yeah.
Thank you so very much for your time and for sharing all of your words of wisdom and advice and encouragement.
Yeah.
Any last words before I ask my last question?
Well, because I'm a person of hope, my tagline is always don't ever stop using your spoken and written words
Mm,
to pierce through the darkness.
love that.
Mhm.
Love that. So I'm interested to see what you say next. So my last question is this. I like to end with like a word or a phrase that we can use in like a writing prompt, a way for us to express our creativity. I'll use this as a prompt at the end of this episode. So if you had to leave us with a word or phrase to use in a prompt, what would you leave us with?
Oh, that, oh, I know. Oh, I know what that is. Okay. You, author, listen up. You were created for such a time as this.
So good. So good. All right, I'm just writing that down. You were created for such a time as this. Oh, that's so good.
Hmm.
You can do so much with that.
Yes.
You could do a scene where this character's feeling defeated
That's
or,
right.
just so many things. So listen, y'all,
Mhm.
stay tuned to the end of this episode to see what I do with that prompt. Thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hmm.
Weighed down by the sea of doubt, the waves of every failure crash against her body, making her sink deeper into the blackened hole of despair. Like an anchor, the chains of comparison weigh her down, holding her in place, keeping her from the glimmer of light shining on the horizon. The imposter steps forward, towering over the hero, the writer, the artist, the creative, taunting their paralyzed state. You are nothing, imposter syndrome gloats, rejoicing as the waves rise higher. The waters are now at her chest, making her breath ragged and shallow. Fingers trembling, she can't grasp footing to stop herself from sinking. It's almost over. But then something in the glimmering light steps through. She can't make out what it is, but the voice, the thing, the gesture is kind. It feels like a life vest as it speaks these words. You were created for such a time as this. Something inside her knows this is true, knows that within her is everything to weather this torrential current of despair. The imposter glowers and bares its venomous teeth. Don't believe it. You are not worthy of this time, this opportunity, this greatness that lies on the horizon. But the words do not crash as she holds on to the glimmer. The voice shining in the horizon calls again. You were created for such a time as this. She doesn't believe it fully, but it is enough to shine light into the darkness. The anchor lightens, and she can feel the waters beneath her sink lower as she stands. I was created for such a time as this, she breathes, and the chains snap and fall. The imposter shakes, knowing she has her footing, and the next time it rises, she will be prepared for its attack. Rising, wet and weathered, she stares into the face of imposter syndrome and says, I was created for such a time as this. The ghastly form of the imposter shrinks and fizzles until all that is left is a puff of darkened smoke that she dispels as she walks through, making her way through muddy ground towards the glimmer of her destiny.